These are folks that have no compunction about murdering people to get what they want.
Most people think a prison cell ends a cartel boss's power. The FBI knows it doesn't. Inside federal prisons, some of the most dangerous men in the Americas still reach past the bars in ways most of us would never believe.
You either accept the bribe or you get killed.
You gotta kill people, you gotta rob, you gotta do what you gotta do to survive.
So agents built a quiet monitoring web, built to catch the smallest signal before it explodes into something deadly.
Gang members protect each other. How dangerous this is.
What they watch and how they do it will change the way you see prisons forever. How cartel bosses still run crime from prison. For years, prosecutors have said that a prison gang called the Mexican Mafia ran crime in and around the Los Angeles County jails like an illegal government. They did not just bully people in the cell block. They collected what they called taxes on smuggled drugs, ordered a tax on anyone who broke their rules, and even gave orders that shaped crimes out on the street. In 2018, the United States Department of Justice unsealed a huge case that pulled back the curtain on how this worked. Federal agents and local officers carried out raids on homes and jail cells across Southern California. They said that more than 80 members and associates of the Mexican Mafia and allied street gangs were part of a long racketeering scheme. That word, racketeering, can sound fancy, but here it just means a big, bundled case that treats the whole gang like one criminal business. Prosecutors said leaders inside the jails controlled who smuggled drugs into the lockups, who sold those drugs in the pods, and which local gangs could sell drugs on the streets. Refuse to pay the tax, and you risked a beating, a stabbing, or worse, all ordered by someone who never left his cell. This is why the FBI cares so much about gang and cartel bosses after they are locked up. A prison sentence does not always end their power. For some of these men, it simply moves their office from a house or a club to a concrete box. Inside that box, they still manage people, money, and fear. They decide if a local crew can work with a cartel. They decide which neighborhood has to pay and how much. They decide who gets hurt when rules are broken. Along the southwest border and deep into the United States, major Mexican drug cartels learned that it is very useful to have strong friends inside American prisons. Reports to Congress and to state lawmakers have said for years that Mexican drug trafficking groups use United States street gangs and prison gangs as enforcers and partners. The cartel brings in the drugs in bulk, and local gangs, including prison gangs, make sure those drugs get sold and that no one steals from the load. In return, the gangs inside and outside get a cut of the product, a cut of the profits, and protection for their own people in Mexico and in United States lockups. A Justice Department report on the rise of violent gangs said that cartels connected to the group often called the Federation, which is tied to the Sinaloa organization, were working closely with prison gangs. These prison gangs included the California Mexican Mafia and the Texas Syndicate. The cartels needed people who could move cocaine and heroin from border cities into the country and hold territory in dangerous neighborhoods. Prison gangs wanted a steady supply of drugs and the status that came with being the chosen middlemen. The deal joined the two worlds together. You can see how this plays out in local cases. In Orange County, California, a federal grand jury charged 31 people in 2022. Prosecutors said they were part of a group called the Orange County Mexican Mafia. The indictment said that 3 men who acted as bosses called the shots from jail or prison while dozens of helpers on the street carried out the orders. The case described 2 murders, 6 attempted murders, and a web of drug and gun crimes. It also described how the bosses forced local Latino street gangs to pay a tax on drug sales and other crimes in their area. Pay up, and you could keep doing business. Refuse, and violence followed. This was not just random letters or street gossip. There was a clear line of command. Gang members in neighborhoods, and even in county jails, treated orders from these locked-up bosses like law. If a boss said someone was greenlit, it meant that person could be attacked. If a boss said a certain street crew was allowed to sell cartel meth in one part of town, other gangs were expected to back off. All of this power came from men sitting in prison cells, not from men walking free. The same pattern shows up with other prison gangs. In Northern California, a gang called Nuestra Familia started decades ago after a fight with the Mexican Mafia, but it grew into its own powerful crime group. Leaders locked in tough prisons like Pelican Bay have been accused again and again of using secret notes and trusted messengers to control drug dealing and gang violence outside the walls. In 2024, 4 senior Nuestra Familia members were convicted in federal court of running a long-term criminal operation that included murder plots, drug dealing, and money laundering, all while key leaders were still in prison. It is not only Latino gangs. The Aryan Brotherhood, a white prison gang, has faced similar cases. In 2024, 3 members of the Aryan Brotherhood were found guilty in a racketeering case that involved murder and drug trafficking, with much of the planning and control happening from inside California prisons. To make this clearer, let's look at one man. José Landa Rodriguez, known as Fox, is a longtime member of the Mexican Mafia from the Mexican state of Michoacán. He has been in United States prisons since the late 1990s. Prosecutors have described him as one of the most feared members of the gang. Over the years, he has faced several cases, including claims that he ran criminal rackets in the Los Angeles County jails and tried to build an alliance between his prison gang and a cartel from his home region. That alliance turned into what reporters later called the Mexican Mafia tapes. A cartel known as La Familia Michoacana wanted protection for its members who were locked up in United States prisons. In return, they were ready to offer the Mexican Mafia an endless supply of meth. A middleman named Ralph Rocha met with cartel contacts and with Landa Rodriguez, who was still behind bars, to talk through the deal. What neither side knew at first was that Rocha had quietly agreed to work with the government. He secretly recorded talks about prices, territory, and protection, giving investigators hours of audio in which a man sitting in a prison cell worked out a business deal with a Mexican cartel. Locking a cartel boss in a concrete box does not silence him. It simply moves the fight to phone lines, emails, letters, and short face-to-face meetings. And on the other side of that glass, federal agents are paying close attention to who he talks to and what he tries to control. Inside the FBI's prison monitoring system. On a normal day in a federal prison, a man picks up the wall phone and enters his personal code. Before he can say anything to his family, a flat voice cuts in. It says the call is from a federal prison and that everything he says may be monitored or recorded. That is not just to scare him. It is the basic rule of the Bureau of Prisons phone system. Official policy limits most calls to about 15 minutes, and inmates usually get about 300 minutes per month, depending on local rules. Behind that short warning is a very large listening setup. The Bureau of Prisons runs a phone network called the Inmate Telephone System, sometimes called TruePhone. Policy says all personal calls must go through that system and cannot be routed around it. When an inmate dials out, the system records the date, time, number called, and which inmate placed the call, and it saves the audio. Staff inside the prison can replay those calls as many times as they want. A Justice Department memo from the 1990s said that as long as inmates get a clear warning and the prison has a written policy, those recorded calls can be shared with law enforcement, even for cases that have nothing to do with prison security. In short, once a cartel boss picks up that phone, his side of the talk can legally end up in a government file. Inside each federal prison, there is a small office that turns all of this into intelligence. It is usually called Special Investigative Services, or SIS. SIS is responsible for watching phones, mail, email, visits, and even inmate money movements, all to spot gang activity and ongoing crime. Staff in that office keep lists of high-risk inmates whose calls and messages must be watched more closely, and alert lists of people whose communications are supposed to be listened to in full. The same logic applies when an inmate sits at a prison computer to send what looks like a simple email. Federal prisons use a system with a long name, the Trust Fund Limited Inmate Computer System, or TrueLinks. It is a closed email system. Inmates can only send text messages, no pictures or files, to people on a pre-approved contact list. They cannot browse the internet, and each message is capped at about 13,000 characters, which is only a few pages of text. Before anyone can use it, both the inmate and the person on the outside must click "I agree" to a warning that every single message can be monitored. From the outside, these notes look like normal emails. Inside the system, they are something very different. A Justice Department memo says the Bureau of Prisons can give prosecutors all of an inmate's TrueLinks emails if they ask. That can even include emails with the inmate's own lawyer, unless that email address is on a special "Do Not Read" list. A report by a New York lawyers group notes that, unlike regular legal mail or in-person legal visits, attorney emails in this system are not automatically treated as private, because everyone has already agreed to monitoring by clicking through the warning screen. Legal groups and law school clinics have been pushing to change this, but for now, it means that a legal strategy typed in a prison email can quietly end up as evidence. Inspector General reports say they use built-in tools to block mass emails sent to many inmates at once and to limit contact with unknown outsiders, especially for high-risk prisoners. They can shut off a prisoner's email access for 30 days at a time if they believe the system is being abused, and can extend that ban if the warden agrees. when the FBI opens a case on a gang leader, agents can ask prison staff to export months of emails at once. Analysts then run simple keyword searches and look at who the inmate writes to and how often. Not every message is digital. Old-fashioned mail is still a major way inmates stay in touch, and a major way the government watches them. The Bureau of Prisons website splits mail into general correspondence and special mail. General mail means letters from family and friends. Staff are allowed to open those envelopes, check inside for contraband, and read the contents to see if anything might threaten safety or order inside the prison. Special mail covers properly marked legal mail from courts, lawyers, and some public officials. That mail can still be opened, but only in front of the inmate, and staff are supposed to look only for physical contraband, not sit and read the words. The main exception is for terrorists and other high-risk inmates, where staff are expected to read 100% of their mail. In practice, some prisons missed letters because of staff shortages, language gaps, and the sheer volume of mail. Even with those gaps, SIS staff and FBI agents told investigators that the letters they did manage to read gave them some of their most useful leads on outside plots and on inmates still trying to run crime from inside. Newer reports show just how large that mail stream is. Between early 2015 and the end of 2017, high-risk inmates received more than 1,300,000 pieces of mail and sent more than 1,200,000 pieces. Phone calls, emails, and letters are not the only things on this grid. Visits are treated the same way. The Communications Review for High-Risk Inmates says the Bureau is supposed to treat social visits, including video visits, as another kind of verbal communication that must be monitored for these prisoners. The Inspector General urged the Bureau to tighten its rules to be sure visits with high-risk and terrorist inmates are always watched closely enough, because weak visit monitoring could let dangerous messages slip through. In daily life, that often means when a cartel boss or gang leader sits down behind glass and picks up a handset to talk to a visitor. A staff member nearby is listening, and in some cases the talk is recorded just like a phone call. When even these measures are not enough, the government can move into a stricter zone called Special Administrative Measures, or SAMS. The Attorney General can approve SAMS when there is a serious risk that an inmate's communication could lead to death, serious injury, or major property damage. Under SAMS, an inmate's phone calls can be cut to just a few tightly controlled minutes per month. Letters can be slowed down and read by special teams before they ever leave the prison. Visits can be limited to a tiny list of approved people under heavy monitoring. Courts have upheld these measures for years, even before the 2001 terror attacks. In one recent case, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman was held in a special unit in New York with sharply restricted mail, media access, and visits because of his history of escapes, murdered witnesses, bribed officials, and running his organization from earlier prisons. SAMS can even reach into the space most people think is safest: talks between a lawyer and a client. In the case of defense attorney Lynn Stewart, she agreed to special rules that were supposed to stop her client, Egyptian religious leader Omar Abdelrahman, from sending messages to his followers. She helped him send those messages anyway. She was later found guilty in federal court of giving material support to terrorism and was sent to prison herself. The bosses who truly understand this system treat official phones and email like a trap. Their real business shifts to secret phones and hidden messages that are not supposed to exist in a prison at all. How cartel bosses try to beat the prison system. A prison cell is not supposed to reach into a family home, but in South Carolina, that is exactly what happened to Captain Robert Johnson. His job was to find and shut down illegal phones and other hidden items inside the prison. One morning, a gunman kicked in his front door and shot him several times in the chest and stomach. Johnson survived after many surgeries and a lot of blood transfusions. Later, he said the attack happened because he was too good at cutting off inmates' contraband phones. Investigators found that an inmate had used a cell phone inside the prison to plan and pay for the hit on him. His story became a warning. A phone in a prison is not just for comfort. It is a remote control for violence. South Carolina's own numbers show how common these phones are. In one recent year, officers seized more than 1,500 illegal phones from state prisons. Because of this danger, state leaders pushed federal officials for tools to block prison cell signals. California shows the same problem on a much bigger scale. A little more than a decade ago, thousands of illegal phones were turning up in California prisons every year. The totals passed 7,000, and then more than 11,000 as searches improved. Many of these phones were found in high-security units at places like Pelican Bay, where gang leaders are supposed to be tightly controlled. For cartel partners and prison gangs, these phones become the real office. They allow fast calls, group chats, and picture messages. They run on private chat apps instead of prison phone lines. With one hidden smartphone, a boss can check on drug shipments, approve an attack, or move money across states while the official phone system stays silent. Phones are not the only way to slip past guards. Prison gangs also use very simple tools that are easy to miss. In California prison slang, a kite or huila is a tiny handwritten note, often written in very small letters and folded again and again until it is the size of a fingernail. Groups like Nuestra Familia and the Mexican Mafia use these micro notes to send orders between housing units and out to the streets. One kite can list who is in charge of a local crew, who owes money, and who has been marked for attack. These slips can be pushed through vents, hidden inside the body, tucked into legal papers, or passed during visits. The writing is often coded, using numbers and nicknames that mean nothing to anyone outside the group. Sometimes a cartel-linked inmate uses both high-tech and low-tech tricks at the same time. In a case tied to the United States Penitentiary in Pollock, Louisiana, prosecutors said an inmate named Juan Carlos Peña helped run a drug trafficking ring from inside the prison. Court records say Peña used illegal phones to talk to people on the outside, line up meth shipments, and guide money payments. Investigators later traced calls, text messages, cash transfers, and packages that moved in and out of the prison as part of the scheme. None of this works without help on the inside. That is where corrupt staff members come in. In California, federal prosecutors uncovered a smuggling network at the Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility near San Diego. One guard, Aníbal Navarro, admitted he took about $45,000 in bribes to bring meth, heroin, marijuana, and cell phones into the prison. He worked with inmates and their families to move the goods through staff entrances and other weak spots. He was later sentenced to a little more than 3 years in federal prison. South Carolina shows how huge these payoffs can get. A captain at Broad River Correctional Institution, Christine Livingston, was charged and later pleaded guilty after federal prosecutors said she took more than $279,000 in bribes over several years. In return, she smuggled at least 173 phones and other items to inmates, working with a convicted killer named Gerald Reeves, who helped organize the payments from inside. News reports say she took money from dozens of inmates and their families. In New Mexico, the Cibola County Correctional Center shows what happens when smuggling becomes normal. The private prison, which holds federal inmates and immigration detainees, has been under FBI investigation for what officials called a significant drug trafficking network inside the walls. Officers found more than 1,000 fentanyl pills, hundreds of Suboxone strips, heroin, and a large amount of meth in cells. Federal agents said corrupt officers and outside helpers moved drugs and other contraband into the facility while overdoses and deaths rose. In a place like that, a cartel boss does not have to work very hard to keep his pipeline open. The system is already leaking. Even people who are supposed to defend inmates in court can become part of the chain. In Southern California, a criminal defense lawyer named Gabriel Zendejas Chavez was indicted in a major Mexican mafia case. He used his status as an attorney to carry messages in and out of jails and prisons for gang leaders. These include orders tied to murder plots, drug dealing, and efforts to expose suspected informants. Lawyers make powerful couriers because normal prison rules give them private visits and special mail protections. When one of them works for a cartel-linked gang, every meeting in a small visiting room can become a planning session for crime on the street. So how do agents catch all of this when it does not go through official phones or email? A lot of the work starts with blocking and finding the devices. Some prisons use managed access systems, which act like fake cell towers. When a phone inside the prison tries to connect, the system can grab the signal and either block it or alert staff. Prisons also use body scanners like the ones in airports to find phones and drug bundles hidden inside the body. They use metal detectors and surprise searches on staff lockers, laundry rooms, kitchens, and outside work crews. But hardware alone is not enough. The FBI and prison investigators rely heavily on people. In many big gang cases, someone inside flips. A low-ranking member or outside helper agrees to wear a hidden recorder, just like former gang member Ralph Rocha did. In other cases, once a corrupt officer or courier is caught, prosecutors push for a plea deal that forces them to explain who paid them, how the contraband moved, and which inmates were behind it. The phones themselves are gold mines. When officers finally grab an illegal phone in a cell or during a traffic stop, digital experts pull out contact lists, chat histories, voice messages, and even saved passwords. One seized device can show every number it called, every text it sent, and every nickname in its contacts. From there, agents can build a map linking a prison cell to street dealers, stash houses, bank accounts, and even cartel contacts in other countries. In cases like the Pollock drug ring and the California smuggling networks, that kind of deep phone work turned messy chats and call logs into clear lines pointing straight at the people in charge. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.